Hey, what's up, Logos American History students? Welcome to June 3rd, 2020. It is Wednesday. Happy Hump Day. Day 48 of our COVID-19 stay-at-home e-learning thing, and it is not the second to last day, but the third to last day of Term 5. We are almost wrapped up with Term 5. We're almost wrapped up with our chapter on the Vietnam War. And it's a good feeling getting close to the end. I don't know about you guys, but I am ready to put Term 5 behind me and move on to bigger and better things with Term 6. But we still have a little bit of work to do before we get there, so let's get right into it. On the blackboard, go ahead and pull up blackboard here. There it is. We're on our class bulletin board. We see the, as always, e-learning instructions with the big red message right here about the Zoom meeting that takes place tomorrow. Tomorrow is Thursday. It's Zoom meeting day, and for this class, our Zoom meeting is at 11 a.m. So you should be looking for the link coming out. It'll be posted to the bulletin board later today. There'll be an assignment with the link under assignments, and there will be emails and messages coming with an invitation to tomorrow's Zoom meeting at 11 a.m. So make sure you set your alarm clock, set your timer to be there at 11 a.m. tomorrow for that Zoom meeting. And we have a assignment for today. This will really be the last assignment, written reading assignment of the term, because we have the Zoom meeting tomorrow, and then Friday is the last day of the term. And so, as I said, we've been discussing the Vietnam War, and the whole term we've been discussing really mostly the 1960s, which, as we've seen, is a decade where there's a lot of division in the country, right? Over a lot of different issues. And the Vietnam War is one of the biggest issues, the biggest crises that divided the country. And the section we're reading today is going to get into that. Now, we've learned a lot about some of the different protest movements that have been going on in the 1960s. It's kind of an interesting time period in American history to be studying right now, considering everything that's going on in America right now. I'd say, just as in the 1960s, we are a very divided country today. No matter what the issue is, whether it's COVID-19 or the police and minorities, there's pretty much two sides, and people are very, very, strongly on their side and very, very strongly against the other side. And it's a difficult situation because it's hard to talk to people, right? Because either people agree with you and you're not really, learning anything from each other. You're just, repeating the same ideas to each other back and forth. Or if you try to, talk with someone who doesn't share your opinion, usually ends in a fight. And I don't know how to fix that. I wish I did. But at least I take some solace in knowing that this isn't the worst division American society's ever experienced, and all we gotta do is study history to know that, and know that we came out of it, stronger, better. So let's take a look at what was dividing the country in the late 1960s, particularly leading up to 1968, which was a huge election year in our country. Again, not very dissimilar to 2020. But let's take a look at 68. 1968 is the big year that we're going to be talking about in this section. That was the year where, again, a presidential election happened where the incumbent, Lyndon B. Johnson, did not run, right? And we'll learn about today why. It wasn't because of term limits. He could have run for re-election, but he didn't. And so who were the candidates in 1968? Well, we'll get to that. Let's open up or download the section, which is section 3 of chapter 24. Take a look at this. And it is, like I said, Political Divisions is the title, right? Political divisions, politically divided. What divided us? A lot of things. But the war, nothing divided America like the Vietnam War. And one of the reading focus questions you see there, well, two of them. Why did President Johnson decide not to seek re-election? How did the Vietnam War affect the election of 1968? And so what we see, we learned about this with the Tet Offensive. There's a large group of anti-war protesters. A lot of those same people that we saw with the counterculture and the hippie movement and all of that, they joined the anti-war movement. Even the civil rights movement and the feminist movements and other movements like that joined the anti-war movement. Martin Luther King became a vocal critic of American involvement in the Vietnam War before his death. But these groups start organizing and launching these massive protests and shutting down universities across the country. Universities were rocked by these anti-war protests. A big part of the opposition to the war was the draft, and we started talking about this yesterday. This was the last time that America drafted unwilling participants and made them go off to war. And as that went on, it just became more and more unpopular because just like any other draft that's ever happened in American history, it's inherently unfair, right? And what I mean by that is if you have money, if you have means, if you have an education, you can avoid the draft and avoid going to war. If you're poor and uneducated, you can't, right? And so the only people who really have to go are the poor and uneducated, right? Why is that? Well, it's because of this deferment process, which allows people who are in school or who can get a doctor's note to get out of going, right? Our president of the United States right now, Donald Trump, famously, infamously, received multiple deferments during the Vietnam War. He was eligible for the draft. He was of the right age that he could have been drafted and sent to the Vietnam War, but he's from a rich family, so he didn't have to go. So this went on, these protests, this opposition, and what we started to see, like I said, was a clear division, right? Clear division between those who, oppose the war, say, we are doing terrible things in Vietnam. There's really no good reason for us to be there, and it's unfair to continue to draft poor people and make them go over to Vietnam and kill people and die. On the other side, you saw people who said people who oppose American involvement in the Vietnam War, people who oppose the government of America doing what the government does, are anti-American. They're they're not patriotic. And so both sides saw the other side as is just evil, right? And this led to President Johnson basically giving up, saying, "That's it, I quit. I'm going home. I'm not running for re-election." And that left the 1968 election wide open. Robert Kennedy, John F. Kennedy's little brother, joined the race. He was running for president in 1968, and he probably would have won. He was running as an anti-war candidate. He said, if I'm elected president, I will end the Vietnam War. His opponent was Richard Nixon, right? The Republican, who also said, if elected, I will end the Vietnam War. So everyone who was running in 1968 was against continuing the Vietnam War. Robert Kennedy was assassinated before the election, just like his brother. And so he didn't win. The Democrat ended up being, after a Democratic convention in Chicago where the police rioted. The police rioted and beat up a bunch of nonviolent protesters. That led to the nomination of Hubert Humphrey, who lost to Richard Nixon, and Richard Nixon's elected president in 1968. And again, it was a very dividing election, a very divided year in 1968, with a lot of consequences that would last past that year. But you do have, as always, some reading comprehension questions to go with that, and if we go back to our assignments tab, a question of the day. Let's take a look at the question of the day. So this, again, is getting to this idea of what has divided the country. What was dividing the country in 1968 was war, and when should America get involved in war? And that's the question of the day for you today. Under what circumstances would you support America going to war? And under what circumstances would you oppose America going to war? Very simple question, not such a simple answer, but there's no wrong answers. Just make sure you contribute your opinion to the discussion about when and if you would support America going to war, and when and if you would oppose, right? And if you oppose, what would you do, right? You're going to go out there and protest? You're going to just stay home and complain? Let me know. And make sure you do the reading and answer the questions. And as always, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow at the Zoom meeting, 11 a.m. Peace.